Welcome back to part 2 of our 3-part Yokai series. If you happen to jump into this one before part 1, then feel free to pause and go watch that one first so it can help you contextualize what we're going to be getting into here. Otherwise, hello again. Today we will be continuing our look through the first Yokai book of artist Toriyama Sekien, and peering into the visage of the weird and wonderful world of Yokai. So, without further ado, let's pick up where we started. The Jorogumo, or woman spider, is a spider that has taken the form of a woman. It is believed that once a Joro spider has lived past a certain age, they gain the ability to shapeshift into women. Using this form, they often lure men into their lairs where they are then eaten. As to why Toriyama Sekien depicted one controlling fire-breathing spiders is beyond me. There are a number of legends surrounding these monsters. Once, a young woman with a child appeared before a warrior who was resting on his porch. The woman turned to the child and excitedly said, "That's him. That's the man who is your father. Go and say hello." The child then ran happily to the warrior. The man, suspecting a trick, drew his sword and slashed at the woman, who let out a dreadful scream and ran off. The next day, while servants were cleaning, they noticed a foul smell coming from the attic. When they opened it, they found a massive spider with a gash on it, dead, and surrounded by the skeletons of its victims. There are also tales of somewhat helpful Jorogumo. In Sendai, for a time, there was a Jorogumo who had taken up residence behind a waterfall and would lay traps for people. If someone was caught in one of these traps, they would be dragged inside and devoured. To get her to stop, the villagers decided to trick the spider by using a tree stump, which was swiftly captured and dragged in. A voice could be heard saying, "Clever, clever," from behind the falls, and after that she left the villagers alone. She was also later deified, and to this day is said to prevent water disasters. Something interesting about how monsters are sometimes dealt with in Japanese legends is that while extermination is an option, many are promoted from fearsome monster into protective gods. This change in status is often done to appease an angry spirit by giving them a place among the divine, and is why several deities appear so fearsome. A ten is a Japanese marten, or something similar to a weasel. The ten was a shapeshifter that was even more superior than the tanuki. Where a fox had 7 disguises, a tanuki had 8, but a 10 had 9. Unfortunately, we don't have quite as much info about them as we do the tanuki and the kitsune. They gained their supernatural powers through growing old, and it was considered bad luck to have one cross your path. In fact, they have a specific trait to them that if they gather in a single place, they create fires. If one were to come across a group of 10s around a home, it was believed to be a bad omen and that house would soon burn down. Sogenbi is a specific onibi. Onibi are similar but not the same as kitsunebi, and we'll be talking about them once it's their turn, whenever that is. Sogenbi, or Sogen's Fire, was an onibi created as a punishment. I'm going to make the assumption that the punished person's name is Sogen. Sogen was a member of the Mibudera Temple in Kyoto. In life, he stole money from the temple to line his own pockets, and when he died, he was punished by losing his body except for his head, which was then set on fire and made to wander the world of the living in a constant torment. For a time, he was able to be seen around the temple's grounds crying out in anguish, but he has since vanished, never to be seen again. Tsurubebi, or bucket fires, are another kind of ghost light. These ones are more mysterious because they are not given a real explanation as to what they are, but are dangling fire-like lights that appear underneath trees. In various regions, they are considered to be the spirits of trees that gently dangle from the branches alongside mountain paths. Despite them being made of fire and touching trees, they never spread their flames, making them an unusual sight to behold. Furarebi are a bird with the head of a dog, wrapped entirely in fire. They are believed to be the deformed spirits of people who were not given a proper burial, and as such were doomed to wander the land. As time passed, it is believed that they took on this form. The reasoning for this is unknown. Ubagabi, or Old Woman's Fire, is yet another type of ghost light, with the difference being that these ones had the face of an old woman. While the name of this woman isn't known, it is believed that she took this form after stealing oil from the Hiraoka shrine. She would appear on rainy nights in the Hiraoka region and torment people. She has been known to assault travelers by crashing into them, and is able to take the form of a bird to better harass them. She can travel 4 kilometers in an instant and is able to appear and disappear at will. Other Ubagabi exist as well, including the spirit of an old woman who drowned other people's children until she herself was drowned in a flood. The Kasha, or Flame Chariot, is a hellish vehicle that will steal the corpses of exceptionally horrible people. Their actual identity is unknown, but they are often attributed to either being a Nekomata or an Oni who plans to take the deceased soul to hell. What the intentions of the Kasha are with the corpse is also unknown, but the idea of having someone's body stolen away by a monster is terrifying. There are a few ways to keep the Kasha from being able to steal the corpse. One is to do a funeral twice. One's with a stone in the casket, which is what gets stolen, and the second one the actual funeral. Another is to leave a hair razor upon the coffin, which will keep the Kasha away. Despite these precautions, sometimes a Kasha will just steal away the body anyway. In the case of a man who died in Edo, a Kasha appeared taking the form of the god Raijin, and caused a lightning storm. The Kasha then stole the man's corpse and fled. Another story is that one day a feudal lord was walking with his troops when they heard a cry and looked into the sky. There, they saw the legs of a person sticking out from the clouds and managed to pull it out. They found that it was the corpse of an old woman and took it to the townsfolk to ask about who she was. The townsfolk told the lord that the old woman was terrible and avaricious, and that because of how she treated others, she was hated by the community. Perhaps for her horrible behavior, she was punished one day while going outside to use the bathroom, when a Kasha appeared and dragged her into the clouds, where she screamed and died. Yanari is another phenomenon that you're likely familiar with. This is when things in the home seem to move of their own volition, or the house itself seems to start shaking. It is most closely associated with poltergeist activity. Toriyama Sekien likened these events to small oni-like creatures that are called yanari, and even today these sounds of old homes creaking because of temperature changes keeps that same name. An example of a yanari haunting goes as follows. In the Edo period, a group of ronin wanted to test their courage, and went into a local haunted house to stay the night. After it had gotten dark, the entire house began to shake so violently that they fled outside, fearing that an earthquake would bring the roof down on top of them. Once out, they noticed that it was only the house that was shaking. They left for the night but tried again the following day and the day after, only for the same thing to happen. They consulted a monk on what to do, and the monk agreed to accompany them that night. They sat in the house, and then the whole place began to shake again, and the monk looked around and found a particularly violent tatami mat, which he stabbed with a dagger. After this, the shaking stopped. They removed the mat and found a shrine. When they asked the locals about it, they told the ronin and the monk that a monstrous bear had once rampaged through the area and was killed by a man who used to live in that house. However, the bear's ghost continued to rampage, and so they built a shrine for it in the man's house. This limited the bear's movement to the home, but it eventually killed the man, leading to the house being abandoned. Ubume are the ghosts of women who died in childbirth. The concept of women who died in this way coming back is one of the oldest type of yokai that we know of. Generally, encounters with this monster go as follows. A traveler will encounter a woman who is crying in the road and ask her what is wrong. The woman will then try to give the traveler her baby. When they take the child, the woman will vanish. When they check on the child, they will see that they have become a bundle of leaves or stones. To prevent a woman who has died in childbirth from becoming an ubume, it was customary to remove the fetus and place it in the mother's arms. In the event that this was not possible, a doll was used instead. A darker variation of this legend exists as well, where they are referred to as obo. When the woman gives you the baby, it will rip out your throat if you clutch it too close. To avoid this, you must throw a cloth over its face. Umizato, or Blind Man of the Sea, appear as biwahoshi, or lute priests, save for the fact that they are encountered on the open ocean. They appear to be able to walk either on the water's surface or are of a significant size that they can walk along the ocean floor. They are an offshoot of another yokai called an umebozu, or sea monk, which are monstrous giants that are seen even in modern times. However, they appear at different times than umebozu. They are often seen beckoning ships into dangerous places, attempting to capsize them, or simply destroying them. Why they do this is unknown. Noero is the accumulated grudge of a head priest made manifest. They appear as temple monks in tattered robes that skulk around the area of abandoned and dilapidated temples. As a manifested grudge, they can act in a way that reflects that nature. Due to a lack of donations from villagers, a temple could very easily fall into disrepair, and after it reached a certain level of degradation, it would stop being occupied. A head priest watching this happen to his own temple would create a Noero that even after the head priest had left would still do the various jobs around the temple that a monk would do. Most hauntingly though is that they would ring the temple's bells in the evenings, notifying the village that though the temple was abandoned now, something still lurked there and blamed them for its sad state. Takaonna, or tall women, are yokai that look like women but are abnormally tall to the point of being disfigured. A Takaonna is created by a woman who is unable to be with a man in her lifetime despite wanting to be. Thus, when she died, her desire to be with someone was so great that she became a yokai. As a Takaonna, she elongates herself to peer into the second-story windows of brothels to watch what she herself could never have. There is a tale involving the Takaonna and a carpenter which I will recount to you now. There once was a carpenter who was successful in his craft. One day he married a beautiful woman and they had a child together. Using his wealth, the carpenter hired 30 servants to help around his home and to help raise the child. However, when the child turned 5 years old, it went missing. The day after the child's disappearance, a servant vanished, and then another the following day, and so on and so forth until there were only 15 left. The carpenter was terrified, so he hired a monk to try and solve the incident. The monk asked if the man had noticed anything unusual, but the carpenter had seen nothing out of the ordinary before the disappearances. The monk then examined the household before leaving. The man's wife asked him what the monk had come for, and the man replied that he had come to examine the house. The wife began to panic, and the carpenter realized that something was wrong. He feigned illness and went to bed early. As he lay in his bed, he heard the monk's voice tell him that when he next saw his wife, he had to flee to the mountains. That evening, the man pretended to be asleep when his wife entered the room. He secretly watched her and saw that she removed the disguise of being a beautiful woman and elongated herself into a monstrous Takaonna. She then left the room and the man fled the home and escaped to the mountains. It was the Takaonna who had killed the servants and her own child, and would have killed him that night if he had not fled. Tenome, or eyes on hands, appear as Umizato, aka a blind man, but rather than having eyes on its hands, they are on the creature's palms. Other than this, they appear as a normal human, but this does not make them any less dangerous. There is a tale about a Tenome that goes as follows. A man wanted to test his courage, and so he went alone into a graveyard in Kyoto. In the graveyard, he was approached by an old man. The young man thought that this was odd when suddenly the old man revealed that he was a Tenome by putting his hands out in front of him and running at the man. The young man fled the graveyard and went into a temple where he begged a monk to hide him in a chest. The Tenome followed after him and broke into the room where the young man was hiding, and then a terrible sound like a dog slurping on a bone was heard. After it stopped, the creature vanished. When the monks went to check on the man, they found that he had been reduced to a pile of skin and that all of his bones had been removed. We're now going to get to a personal favorite of mine. Tesso is the name of a monk who turned into a yokai. Originally called Raigo, he served as a monk under Emperor Shirakawa. At the time, the emperor was struggling to produce an heir and so sought the help of Raigo, who offered to give his sincerest prayers day and night for the emperor if he could be given any one thing that he desired. The emperor agreed to this, and after a time was successful in producing an heir. In his joy, he asked Raigo what he wanted, to which the monk humbly requested that he receive funds to construct an ordination platform for the Midera temple. However, the emperor was under the influence of a larger religious body in the Enrakyoji temple of Mount Hiei who held some power over him. They essentially forced the emperor to deny this request. In retaliation for this betrayal, Raigo went into a fast where he prayed for 100 days without food or water that the prince born of his own prayers would fall. On the 100th day, Raigo, now appearing like a terrible demon, died. However, his spirit lived on as an onryo, or a vengeful spirit, that would appear beside the young prince's bedside every night. Fearing for the prince's life, the emperor searched for people to try and get rid of Raigo's spirit, but to no avail, and eventually the prince passed away after his 4th birthday. But the grudge did not end there. Raigo then set his sights on the Enrakyoji temple and became either a giant rat or 84,000 normal-sized rats with iron teeth and stone bodies and attacked the temple. They destroyed countless religious texts and even attacked the Buddha statues. To try and quell this grudge, the temple had to construct a shrine to Raigo that faces where the temple was and he was deified. This stopped the rat infestation and appeased his soul for the time. Kurozuka, or Black Mound, is more of a story than a yokai itself. Also, this is so far the only one to have an image that was banned by the Meiji government, which I don't know if I can show on YouTube, but if you can see it right here, this is what it looks like. The story goes like this. In the year 726, a traveling monk encountered an old woman as the sun was setting and asked if he could take up lodging with her. The old woman lived in a cave but accepted the monk in. The old woman then said that she would leave to get firewood but that the monk should stay put and not venture further in. He agreed and the old woman left. Naturally, he ventured further in and found a room that he peered into. Inside was a mountain of human bones. This reminded him that there was reports of an Oni Baba that lived along this road that would attack and eat travelers. As such, he fled the cave in terror. Sometime after, the Oni Baba returned and noticed that the man had vanished. She took on her monstrous true form and gave chase at a supernatural speed. She soon caught up to the monk who was about to catch him when he pulled out a statue of a bodhisattva and performed a sutra. The statue came alive and danced in the sky, where it shot an arrow at the Oni Baba, killing it. The Oni Baba's soul was saved by the Buddha's guidance and buried in the titular Black Mound around the Abukuma River. Rokurokubi are another yokai that appear to be a human save for key details: their necks. Rokurokubi come in 2 different variations, one where the neck stretches to a disturbingly long length, and another where the head detaches itself completely from the neck. Rokurokubi are not necessarily evil, but sometimes are portrayed as such. On the one hand, they appear as women whose necks stretch out with their bodies as they sleep, and this is viewed as the soul attempting to wander outside of the body. On the other hand, they are also described as vampiric in attacking travelers to drink their blood, or in some cases, just eat them. But even more than that, it was believed for a time to be something like an illness. If someone who suffered from poor karma had a daughter, it was possible for her to be born as a Rokurokubi. As for the nukekubi, they are more often portrayed as being just straight up evil. Their heads detach from their bodies in search of victims. However, if one moves the still resting body of a nukekubi while the head is off, then the nukekubi won't be able to attach itself and will eventually starve to death. A classic tale of a nukekubi goes like this. One day, a ronin is walking through a bamboo forest when night suddenly falls. The man encounters a group of bamboo cutters who offer to let him stay with them for the night. The ronin accepts and accompanies them to their home, where they have dinner and go to sleep. The ronin wakes up having felt uneasy and goes to check on the bamboo cutters. When he enters their bedrooms, he finds that all of their bodies have no heads. Suspecting something amiss, he moves all the bodies to the main room and hides outside the home. Soon after, the nukekubi return, discussing that they look forward to eating the ronin when they notice their bodies and let out a horrible shriek. All but one of them dies from shock, but the final one sees the ronin and attacks him, trying to rip off his arms, but instead biting down so hard on his sleeve that it can't remove itself, and thus it dies as well. The ronin then goes to the nearest town and explains what happened to the people there. Sakabashira, or reverse pillar, is not a monster as much as it is a folk belief. A pillar for a house should always be placed the way in which the tree was growing, otherwise it would curse the inhabitants of the home it was used for. These curses included the decline of fortunes and yanari activity to occur. That said, this belief was also used to circumvent disasters, essentially taking a lesser of two evils. At the gate Yomeamon at the Nikko Toshoku, there is a Sakabarashi, which is evidenced by the fact that it is the only pillar to have its engravings upside down. This was done intentionally, as it was prophesied that once the temple was completed with construction, it would immediately begin to collapse. By putting one pillar upside down, the construction was never fully finished, and thus the curse was avoided. Makuragaeshi, or pillow flip, is a yokai that attacks people as they sleep. They are often described to appear as a small child, though they are rarely seen. What they do is flip your pillow while you sleep and move your head and feet around. The action of flipping the pillow of a sleeping person was believed to be dangerous because it was believed that as one dreams, their soul left their body. So, disturbing the body made it either difficult or impossible for the soul to return. Originally, these creatures were completely malicious, and they did this in revenge for being wronged. An example being a group of woodcutters all working to chop down a massive tree that, unknown to them, held a spirit within it. At night, when the woodcutters fell asleep, the creature killed them by flipping their pillows. In modern times, though, they are considered to be more of a nuisance and a prankster, flipping the pillows of people and then sitting upon their chest to watch them agonize as they attempt to put their souls back into their body. A common association with these creatures is the Zashiki Warashi, which shares the appearance of a small child, but are instead said to bring good fortune if you treat them well. Perhaps these soul-stealing acts were done by Zashiki Warashi, seeking revenge for being wronged. Yukiona, or snow women, is another humanoid yokai that appear in the snowier regions of Japan. They appear as a beautiful woman with a long ornate kimono, unfit for the weather that they are seen in, pale skin, and a freezing touch. They are exceptionally dangerous, but are often found in stories seeking the companionship of men. A classic Yukiona tale goes as such. There was once a pair of woodcutters, an old man and his young apprentice, who lived in the woods in a cabin. One winter evening, they got caught in a snowstorm and began making their way back to their cabin, when they suddenly encountered a beautiful young woman alone on the road. They were perplexed by this and made her follow them to their home to keep her out of the storm. Once inside, the men ate and offered the woman food, which she declined. The men found it odd, but went to bed regardless after giving the woman a place to sleep. That night, the young man was awoken by the harsh cold and opened his eyes to see the woman standing over his companion. She had breathed an icy breath over the old man, which had frozen him solid. The young man panicked and ran to the nearest town in the storm, almost killing him in the process. Ikiryo are the spirits of people who are still alive that have left the body to go and roam freely. The Japanese belief that the human soul is able to leave the body has been around since ancient times, and Ikiryo, though, does this entirely out of malice. When a person harbors a grudge strong enough, they are able to project their souls out of their body to harass, curse, and attack the object of their hatred. While this is generally done unconsciously, it is possible to do it on purpose with a more devious intent, namely by performing a ritual at the hour of the ox. This can be found as far back as in the literature of Murasaki Shikibu's Tale of Genji, where the Ikiryo of Lady Rokujo harassed Genji's lover Aoi until she died. During the Edo period as well, this was considered a disease for what we now call sleepwalking and out-of-body experiences. A Yurei is a ghost. All souls of the deceased are considered Yurei, but Yurei themselves fall into various different classifications depending on what they do, how they died, and if they hold a grudge. Their appearance also differs, often depending on how they died. For example, a woman who was murdered may appear with bloody gashes across their chest. A man who was hit by a car may appear mangled and disfigured. Traditionally, though, they appear in the white robes of a Japanese funeral, and sometimes wearing a tenkon, which is the white triangular headband which is akin to a halo. The hands of a Yurei dangle in front of them with their arms outstretched at a 90-degree angle, and they very rarely have feet. One of the most famous Yurei legends comes from Himeji Castle's Okiku. Okiku was a beautiful young woman who worked under the samurai Aoyama Tesson. Tesson wished to be with Okiku, but she rejected him time and time again. Eventually, Tesson grew frustrated and decided to blackmail the girl. He took one plate from a set of 10 and hid it away, then called Okiku asking where it was. Okiku had cleaned the plates recently and so knew that there were 10, and counted them, only to find one was missing. She began to panic and counted them again and again. Tesson feigned frustration. He then made her an offer. If she would marry him, he would forgive her for losing the plate. Okiku still refused, and in a rage, Tesson threw her into a well where she died. Soon after in the night, other servants and Tesson himself could hear the ghostly voice of a woman coming from the well, counting from 1 to 9. But when it should have reached 10, it instead let out an inhuman scream. This eventually led Tesson to be driven mad. And that is where I will leave you all today. Look forward to part 3 coming out soon. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. Feel free to do all the YouTube things, check out the Patreon, check out the podcast. But for now, guys, keep your chin up. Peace out.